Hello everyone, it's Ron Milligan with RE/MAX Select here, coming to you from our offices here in Portland's Pearl District. And as usual, I have got our weekly market statistics for residential housing in the entire Portland metro area. That includes both the Oregon and Washington sides of the metro area here. That's the sampling that we draw our statistics from. So we're going to look at the supply and demand numbers as usual, and then also at some at the sale numbers, the number of closings that we had this last week and how they did on the market, and some rather surprising results. So we'll get into that in just a minute. So first thing is the supply side. So we're looking at the number of available listings, the number of active listings that buyers have to choose from, and that number actually went up, which is a good thing. We're at 1846 active listings versus last week, the same time last week, we're at 1754. So, you know, we've been dealing with kind of a real constrained supply of available listings for buyers to choose from. So it is good to see some listings start to pop up on the market. When I looked at this year versus last year, just for a little context, the number of active listings was still down, but we're only down 12% this year versus where we were last year at this time. Last year at this time we had 2,099, and again this year we're at 1846 for available listings. So on the other side, the demand side, the number of new transactions, so the number of new pendings that we had for last week, was up slightly. That number was 883 versus the previous week, which is 847. So the slight increase, but at least what we're seeing is that the demand is staying pretty strong and pretty steady. I did look back at last year, approximately the same time period last year, and the number of new pending transactions that we saw then was 946. So it was slightly higher last year, not a huge amount, but also not an insignificant amount, but not terrible, you know, given what's going on with the market and the supply and demand right now. This year we just have a lot less to choose from versus last year when there was more to choose from and more hitting the market. The number of total pendings, the total number of pendings was 4909. That continues to go up week after week. You can see this here in the graph. Last week it was 4791, and then you can see that it's just on a gradual rise here. When we compare this year to last year, approximately the same time period last year, the number of pending transactions is down about 11.5%. Not a surprise. I think that's mainly because that time period leading up to that frenzy that we started at the end of January, beginning of February, that was, you know, typically our off season. This year, that the off season was pretty quiet. The year before, the market just kept going great guns through the off season, so it had a little bit of headwind versus what we're dealing with this year. Not terrible, because last year was unusual. This was more like a normal market for us, where we kind of take a break during the off season there. Looking at the number of transactions that closed, that number was 606, and that's down from 673 the previous week. And these are for the transactions that went under contract probably at the end of January and the beginning of February. And that's important because that's when we had our market frenzy start to kick off this year. Like I said, we were quieter November, December, and January, and started to pick up at the end of January and the beginning of February. When I looked at last year, where we were at the same time period last year, the number of homes sold was down. That was 569 versus where we are 606 right now. So for the third week in a row, we're actually outpacing last year for the number of homes it's selling. And when we look at how those homes did on the market once they close, the numbers are a little bit surprising. So average days on market, here's the first one. Last week we're at 23. This week we're at 17 days on market. That's a significant drop, and I think that has everything to do with what happened. If you remember back in the beginning of February, we were doing our videos, or I was doing my videos, and I was talking anecdotally about properties that were hitting the market that were well positioned, well appointed, well staged, ready to go, great neighborhood, great pricing, all that stuff. Those homes were going with multiple, like tons of offers, like more than 10 offers each, and in some cases going way over asking price. So this is the result of that. You know, the days on market went way down. Last year at the same time period, we're at 30 days on market on average. For the median, both this year and last year, it's five days on market, so not a big change there. The average sale price came in at $596,308. Last year at this time, that number was $546,640. That's about a 9.1% increase this year over last year. Keep in mind that this is a really small sample, and these numbers can be kind of volatile given the smaller sample. You can have a few big transactions close or a bunch of small transactions close and pull that number one way or the other. If we're looking at the median, that was $555,000 versus $475,000 last year. That's a 13.7% increase, and that's more on par with what we've been seeing up till this point. Last year, we ended the year at 15.8% increase in the average sale price, and in January, that number was 14%. So this is a little closer to that. The number does feel a little bit lower, which is okay. We don't need to have that hyper appreciation. That was a little bit crazy, and it's really difficult to deal with. And at one point, we're going to hit this high point where buyers are just going to say, no, I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. So it would be good to have that number kind of drop back, fall back a little bit. I suspect that the number still will be pretty high, pretty aggressive through May, and then over the summer months, we'll see this probably recede a bit. The last thing that we saw with our transactions that sold is that average sale price versus list price. For the average, that came in at 104.19, and for the median, that came in at 104.76, almost 105% over the asking price on average there. So very surprising. That might be, I haven't checked this yet, but that might be the highest number that we've seen in more than a year. I don't think we saw this number at all last year, 105%. So that's where we are right now with the numbers. If you've got any questions or thoughts on what we've seen here and what I've gone over, I'm more than happy to respond. You can leave your comments down below or just reach out to me directly. And then, of course, as I say every week, all real estate is local. So if you're curious about what's going on in your specific neighborhood or your municipality or even your condo complex, feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to share what we know or do a bit of research for you. All right, we'll see you next week.